What if I told you there's a place on Earth where humans forced two oceans to meet, where mountains were ripped apart, rivers were tamed, and tens of thousands of lives were sacrificed just to carve a shortcut through the planet itself? And not just any shortcut, one that reshaped global trade forever. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll understand exactly how something once called impossible became one of the greatest engineering feats in human history. There was a time when the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans were separated by just a thin stretch of land, about 50 miles of dense, unforgiving jungle. For millions of years, that land stood untouched, acting as a natural barrier between two massive bodies of water. But humans looked at it and saw something different. They saw an opportunity, a challenge, a dream. The idea wasn't new. As early as 1513, explorers crossing Central America realized just how close the two oceans really were. It sparked a vision that would haunt engineers and rulers for centuries. In 1524, the Spanish crown even ordered surveys of the region, imagining a canal that could transform global trade. But at the time, the technology simply didn't exist. The dream stayed just that, a dream. Fast forward a few centuries, and the need for a shortcut became urgent. Ships traveling between the east and west coasts of the Americas had no choice but to sail all the way around the southern tip of South America, a brutal 13,000-mile journey around Cape Horn, where violent storms and icy waters claimed countless ships. It was slow, dangerous, and incredibly expensive. Then came the California Gold Rush in 1848, and suddenly time mattered more than ever. Thousands of people needed a faster way to cross between oceans. That's when the first real breakthrough happened. Not a canal, but a railroad. Between 1850 and 1855, a railway was built across Panama, cutting travel time dramatically. But it came at a horrifying cost, around 12,000 lives lost during construction. Still, the railroad proved something critical. The route was possible. And right alongside it, the idea of a canal began to take root again. By the late 1800s, one man believed he could finally make it happen. He had already achieved something extraordinary, building a canal through Egypt that connected the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. That success made him a global hero, and people trusted him completely. So when he proposed building a canal through Panama, the world listened. In 1879, a massive international meeting was held, bringing together experts from dozens of countries to plan the project. One engineer suggested a lock-based canal system, using water levels to raise and lower ships. It was the smarter approach, but the man in charge had other ideas. He believed in building a sea-level canal, just like the one he had already completed. No locks, just dig straight through. That decision would prove catastrophic. Construction began in the early 1880s, and almost immediately, everything went wrong. The jungle wasn't just difficult, it was deadly. Workers faced relentless heat, torrential rains, and two invisible killers, yellow fever and malaria. These diseases spread rapidly, cutting down workers faster than any progress could be made. And then there was the land itself. The Chagres River, calm at times, could swell dramatically during the rainy season, rising up to 80 feet and washing away months of hard work overnight. It was unpredictable, uncontrollable, and devastating. By the mid-1880s, workers were dying at an alarming rate, hundreds every month. Desperation set in. Eventually, the original plan had to be reconsidered, and emergency lock designs were quietly introduced. But it was too late. Financial scandals erupted, trust collapsed, and the entire project fell apart. The once celebrated leader behind it all died in disgrace. For a while, the dream of a canal seemed dead again, but not for long. Attention soon shifted to the United States. After much debate and some clever political maneuvering, the decision was made to build the canal in Panama instead of Nicaragua. In 1903, a revolution in Panama, supported by the U.S., led to the creation of a new nation. Shortly after, a treaty was signed granting the U.S. control over a strip of land where the canal would be built. In 1904, construction began again, but the Americans inherited a nightmare. The site was filled with abandoned equipment, disease-ridden camps, and the remnants of a failed project. The first chief engineer didn't last a year before quitting. Morale was low and the challenges seemed endless. Then came a turning point, one that didn't involve digging at all. A doctor arrived with a radical idea. Instead of fighting disease after it spread, eliminate its source entirely. At the time, it was becoming clear that mosquitoes were responsible for spreading both yellow fever and malaria. So the plan was simple but massive in scale: wipe out the mosquitoes. Homes were screened, standing water was drained, and entire areas were fumigated. Thousands of workers were involved in this effort alone. Slowly but surely, it worked. By 1905, yellow fever had been eliminated in the area, and malaria cases dropped dramatically. For the first time, the canal project had a real chance. With disease under control, focus returned to construction. A new chief engineer took over and made a bold move. He stopped all digging. Instead, he focused on rebuilding the infrastructure, especially the railroad. Without an efficient way to remove excavated dirt, progress would be impossible. Massive steam shovels were brought in, mounted on rail systems to maximize efficiency. The entire operation became a carefully coordinated machine. At the same time, the original sea level plan was finally abandoned. A lock-based system was approved, which would allow ships to be lifted up to an artificial lake and then lowered back down on the other side. It was a game changer. The workforce grew rapidly, with tens of thousands of laborers, many from the Caribbean, taking on the dangerous work. Conditions were harsh, and inequality was deeply embedded in the system, with workers divided into different pay scales based on race. Despite this, communities formed and life continued around the construction zones. The most challenging part of the project was cutting through a mountain range known as the Continental Divide. This section required removing an enormous amount of earth and rock. Explosives were used on a massive scale, tens of millions of pounds of dynamite. Landslides were constant, sometimes undoing weeks of progress in a single moment. It was relentless. Mud, heat, noise, and danger surrounded the workers every day. Yet progress continued. Eventually, the excavation was completed, and an enormous artificial lake was created by damming the Chagres River. Entire Monotic were flooded, and communities had to relocate. Beneath the surface of that lake today lie the remains of those lost settlements. The lock system itself was a marvel. Massive chambers were built, capable of raising ships dozens of feet, using nothing but gravity and water flow. The gates were enormous, but designed so efficiently that they could be opened with relatively little power. After years of effort, testing began, and against all odds, it worked. By late 1913, the canal was essentially complete. Water filled the Messier, connecting the oceans for the first time. In 1914, the first official ship made the journey, marking the beginning of a new era. But the moment was overshadowed by the outbreak of World War I, and the global celebration that might have been never truly happened. Still, the impact was immediate. Ships no longer needed to make the dangerous journey around South America. Trade routes were transformed overnight. The cost, however, was staggering. Over 25,000 lives were lost during the construction of the canal, workers who endured unimaginable conditions to make it possible. Over the decades, the canal continued to evolve. Additional dams were built to manage water supply. Its strategic importance grew, especially during times of war, and eventually control of the canal was transferred fully to Panama at the end of the 20th century. In the 21st century, the canal was expanded to handle larger ships, ensuring it remains a vital part of global trade. Today, it operates continuously, handling a significant portion of the world's shipping traffic. What was once considered impossible is now an everyday reality, a functioning system that moves billions of dollars worth of goods across the globe each year. But beyond the economy and engineering, there's something deeper carved into those land walls. Every blast, every stumble, every success tells the story of human determination pushed to its limits. This wasn't just a canal, it was a statement, a declaration that even the most impossible barriers can be broken if the cost is paid. And now that you've seen how humanity reshaped the planet itself, the real question is, what challenge could possibly be next?